So my name is Sam. I'm the co-CEO and co-founder of Eureeca.com. Eureeca is a global equity and regulated crowdfunding business. We allow companies to raise expansion capital on the platform from investors, and investors tend to be institutional investors as well as angel investors as well as everyday investors. Well, today we're going to be talking about equity crowdfunding and what equity crowdfunding is and the joys of raising funds via an equity crowdfunding platform, and also touch on Eureeca and what the business does and where we operate and how it works for entrepreneurs to raise money via the platform. Building a business is not easy. It's very, very hard, especially from scratch, right? You devote your entire life as an entrepreneur towards a business. You work very hard, and as I was saying, 6.5 days a week at least. And then at some point in your life, you're going to have to raise funds in order for you to expand and grow. The alternative thought is you can grow organically, but that would take a very, very long time before it's complete. You can leapfrog that growth path by raising funds in general, but what you've got to be picky about is the method and the route that you actually, as an entrepreneur, raise funds via. You've got to be wary of the terms that are being applied by venture capitalists nowadays, because they really sometimes ask for quite harsh terms. You've got to, in my opinion, pick the right equity crowdfunding platform for you in order for you to raise that expansion capital. And once you've identified your strategic mission, and when it is involving expanding into other markets, then your choice is clear, which is Eureeca.com. Stay tuned to this space for more.
Just flew in from Dubai a few days ago. I was told about this event and I was excited about it because what excites me personally is I've been in your shoes a few years ago, right? And working out of a co-working space, starting this little baby, and now we are in multiple markets. Eureeca is the only equity crowdfunding platform that operates in 3 different continents. We are the most regulated or licensed equity crowdfunding platform on the planet today. So what is, again, I repeat, what was exciting for me is coming speaking to you guys and answering your questions about equity crowdfunding, about the product itself, but also because I was in your shoes a few years ago before we became, a multi-regulated equity crowdfunding platform that operates in many markets. Hopefully your ventures and your businesses will get there at some point, and you've got to have the vision and the tenacity to obviously get through these many hurdles that you got in the beginning. It's not easy, and especially when it comes to raising funds, which is why we ourselves started Eureeca, in order for us to not just make it because raising funds itself is a full-time job. It's not easy at all persuading investors to invest in your business, especially when it's early stage. When it's late stage, people can pile in, right? I mean, because you've de-risked it completely. But it's at the early stage where it's hardest for you to raise the capital, because there's a lot of risk involved in it from an investor perspective. So it is a full-time job by itself, but Eureeca has made it a part-time job. So I'm basically here to talk to you about that and to answer any questions you have with regards to the business model itself. I was going to go through a presentation, to be honest, but I think right now, do we have time to go through a presentation, or you want me to go through a presentation? All right, I'll go through it and I'll try and whiz through it quickly, and then we get to the gist of this, which is the most exciting part, I think, which is the Q&A, and you can ask me questions and I can answer. So if we can start, please. So I want to tell you the story so far, and as I just told you initially, we started Eureeca out of Dubai. We started about 4.5 years ago. At the time, regulators were not were not liking the concept at all. It took them a very long time. It took us a very long time to socialize the concept and the idea with regulators. We always knew that the business had to be regulated in order for it to operate, but because it was so new as a product at the time, they didn't want to touch it. So we launched out of Dubai with Dubai-based businesses, funded those. We always knew that in order for it to be a successful business, it's got to be scalable. And in order for it to be scalable, it needs to cross borders. So it can't be just focused on one market. So it took us about a year and a half, I want to say a year and a half or a year or 8 months before we launched the business. And this is when we were working out of a co-working space at the time for that number of months, because we were at the time trying to solve for a global solution. So we were solving for, if we got a company out of South Africa, for example, how can we raise money for it? Because every market's got its own different idiosyncrasies and challenges. So it took us a very long time to solve for this, and a lot of money paid to lawyers at the time, and it took away all of our savings, basically, but it's the risk that we had to take at the time. So after launching out of Dubai with Dubai-based businesses, we proved the concept, and then we crossed borders. We wanted to prove to the industry that we're the first and only equity crowdfunding platform that solved for a global solution. So we crossed borders into listing companies from Lebanon, from Jordan, from Egypt, from Kuwait. We funded some of those, and then a catalyst happened for the business that we were wanting to happen for a very long time, which is us getting regulated by the UK's FCA finally. So we got the badge from the UK, which is the main regulator. FCA is the main regulator in the United Kingdom. And that is a catalyst for the business because that license itself is passportable to 22 different jurisdictions around the world. So it meant that we can expand with that license. But also, not only that, regulators around the world, obviously us being regulated by a top tier regulator, they saw us as the guys that are, if you like, for lack of a better word, kosher, right? They're not cowboys, they're regulated by the UK's FCA. So they started reaching out to us in some cases because they wanted to regulate equity crowdfunding in their own country. Why is that? Because it's clear, right? 60 to 70% of the jobs worldwide are created by the SME sector, by you guys, and 90% of any company hiring takes place after the company's been funded, not before. So they wanted, if you want as a country, as a Ministry of Economy, to do something about the job sector, to do something about lowering unemployment rates, you've got to solve for providing SMEs with funding, because these are the ones that create the jobs. So they started reaching out to us. And we helped in some countries write the equity crowdfunding law, and we helped assist and we helped advise on how the crowdfunding law should be written in some countries and how it would work versus working in developed markets. We got regulated in Malaysia, I want to say about 2.5 years ago, if I recall correctly. And then we also passported our license to Holland because we identified Holland would be our European hub. And then after that, finally, after 4.5 years worth of dialogue with our own regulator in Dubai, we got regulated in our own backyard. So as a result, as I was starting to say, that we are the only equity crowdfunding platform that is multi-regulated and works and operates in 3 different jurisdictions: Europe, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. Fast forward, I want to say 2 quarters from now, so towards mid-2019, we will have 8 licenses under our badge because we're expanding to Indonesia, to Thailand, also expanding into Germany, as well as Saudi Arabia. So that is the story so far. Why is that relevant to you guys? Because at every market that we go into, we naturally obtain investors, right? Because we list companies from these markets and we market for investors in these markets. And why is that relevant to you guys is because, and why are we different when compared to other equity crowdfunding platforms here, is because of our international investor base, right? That's our USP, that's our unique selling point. What ends up happening when entrepreneurs raise money via the platform, very frequently they end up getting investors from various markets that actually want to take their product or franchise their product to other markets. So if you were featured on Eureeca, it's likely, and the product is a nice product that people like, it is likely that you're going to get Dutch or UK-based investors or Dubai-based investors that not only will invest in your business, but they want to take your business to other markets. So it's an expansion opportunity as well, not just raising the capital. Sorry, I went too far ahead. So why are we good for entrepreneurs? I'm going to remind myself of this stuff. As I was saying to you, that we are in multiple markets. It is important for you when you are raising funds to validate the valuation, right? Because this is a big question mark in a very early stage business. How do you price it? How do you come up with a valuation for the business? We do that, and the moment you get funded by a number of people via any equity crowdfunding platform, that validates and put a floor to the price. There are other reporting tools that we provide entrepreneurs, but also the joy of crowdfunding. And again, crowdfunding is somewhat misleading because people automatically assume that it just comes from the crowd, that it's just people like you and I, but they don't realize there are institutional investors that invest via the platform as well. They don't realize that there are angel investors that invest via the platform. So it's equity crowdfunding platforms are pretty much investor friendly across the board. We don't just focus on the crowd, but also it allows the crowd to invest and co-invest through the platform with other professional and sophisticated investors and institutional investors. What is the real joy, apart from the expansion capital that we talked about earlier on? What is the real joy for any entrepreneur is actually the loyalty that you when you raise money from a bunch of investors via the crowd, they become your brand ambassadors because they've got a vested interest in your business. If they invest in 10, 5,000 ringgit or whatever in your business, they naturally promote your product. They tell people about your product. They tell everybody throughout their dinners and their lunches about your business, and they promote it. I mean, I want to say that a large portion of, to say this as an example, last year decided that we would list Eureeca on Eureeca itself to raise money for Eureeca itself. And we put it on there, that was last August, we put it on there and we raised just under $500,000 in 6 hours, right? So for us, this was a triumph. Why was it a triumph? Because it's very validating. As an entrepreneur, you don't realize, you wake up in the morning, you go to work, and you work 6.5 days a week, and you don't realize that there is a bunch of people out there that actually believe in everything you're building, right? And as a consequence of that, of us getting so many investors from various markets and various countries, a lot of the businesses that come to Eureeca that are featured on the platform right now are referrals, right? Because they come from our own investors. So our own investors that have a vested interest in the business are referring businesses to us, and they're referring investors to us. So whatever you guys are producing or whatever you guys are giving birth to right now, think of it as a loyalty scheme as well, in that you want to get as many people as possible investing in your business because they refer you business. Not only that they provide you with the capital, but they refer you business as well. Yeah. Naturally, needless to say, it's interest-free capital, and you do also get a bunch of strategic investors that co-invest as well. Can we move this second? So, I'll stand up for this. So, we help your businesses by getting you fit for funding. So we take a look at your pitch deck, we take a look at your financials, we take a look at all the documentation, and we finesse it. We make it look investor friendly. We make it look like it's suitable for investors. And we work together with you on this. We also provide you with some confidential raises. Now, people automatically assume that, okay, if I'm making it on a crowdfunding platform, somebody's going to steal the idea from me somewhere, right? We do provide that to you, as in we can have a confidential raise rather than it be all the documentation are open and viewable to everybody else. We also help you in your valuation, in setting a real range with regards to how much this company should be valued at. And we have, sometimes entrepreneurs would like to, given the opportunity and given the traction, would like to raise further funds, and they can go into something called overfunding. So there will be a set target of how much they would naturally raise, but you can actually, as an entrepreneur, go into something called overfunding and raise more than you actually wanted initially. All the campaign tools we provide you, and we provide you right at the beginning of the journey, and we help you campaign alongside you by promoting your business and your product online, social media, etc. And we also help in structuring something called an early adoption scheme. What that basically is, in order for us to increase the likelihood of any business raising money, we structure together something called an early adoption scheme, which is, let's say if they're raising a total of $400,000, then the first $100,000 would go for a 20% discount to fair value on a first come, first served basis. What we try and do is build momentum, and the second tranche of $100,000 would go at 15% discount to fair value. What we try and do is encourage, as I said, investors to come in first in order for them to validate it, and then other people come in later. So we work together with you on this. We provide nominee services, so some entrepreneurs don't like it, rightly so, that they would have a bunch of investors on their cap table. What we do is we provide you with the Eureeca nominee service. So you just see one investor in your cap table, and we deal with the rest if there were, because you naturally would raise the money from a bunch of people. So you just see one investor, and we act as nominee on behalf of the investors. There is also a function on the platform which is pre-raised, and it's quite common where entrepreneurs come to us and they basically say, well, I've got an investor already that has invested recently or about to invest. We show that on the barometer as well as pre-raised capital to help with momentum in the beginning of the campaign. For investors, and this is the thing, right, and it's growing, I think, right now, is that people in general, especially in this part of the world, are so used to investing in one asset class, and that asset class tends to be real estate. It's because what we've been taught throughout generations, right? Whenever you, as a person, ends up graduating from university, you want to save up a bit of money and then go and buy an apartment immediately. That's what we've been told through our parents and our great-grandparents. And people are not used to investing in such an asset class, which is high yielding, high risk, high yield. So we provide that to investors. With the emergence of equity crowdfunding platforms globally, now we have a chance as normal people to invest in growing businesses and thriving businesses across the world that we never knew about, right? If we knew about Facebook raising money 12 years ago, then you and I would have loved to have owned $1,000 worth or whatever, but we didn't, right? So it used to go to the elite and the elite only. Now this process with equity crowdfunding platforms democratizes the entire thing and provides investors with a regulated, structured manner in order for them to invest in thriving businesses. We allow them to diversify their portfolio, so we encourage investors to basically invest in multiple different sectors and multiple different geographies at the same time. You as an investor don't want to be so exposed to one sector or one geography. You want to diversify your investments. And we also allow them to act as nominee. We act as nominee on behalf of these investors and put them all in one bucket, but also we provide investors with pitch events. For example, we've got a pitch event taking place in Dubai in January, towards the end of January, and that's when we invite all of our investors to the Capital Club in Dubai International Financial Center, and we get entrepreneurs from various parts of the world, Malaysia included, to pitch in front of these strategic investors as well. Yeah, and as I was saying to you earlier, that our USP is pretty clear. It's the expansion play, really. And you don't have to, if you're raising money right now through equity crowdfunding platform or through Eureeca, and you're raising money and you're thinking, but I'm still way too early stage in order for me to expand to other markets right now. It's too early. I want to get it right in this market first before expanding out. Well, that's okay. You can always obtain some capital from international investors with a view that you're looking to go to that market in 2 years from now. It doesn't have to be now, right? So it's an exciting way to not only raise the capital but also expand to other markets, because those investors in these markets are the ones that actually add value on the ground. They help you in incorporating the business and finding an office and finding lawyers or whatever it is, because they live there, they live in that local market. So it's an exciting way to raise the funds. So our target market, for all clarity, we focus on companies that are raising anywhere between $250,000 to $2 million. It's got to be post-operational, post-revenue, and we tend to like emotional products, as in B2C companies. The B2B companies struggle generally on equity crowdfunding platforms because people do not understand the business. If you put them in front of an aluminum factory or whatever, they don't understand it. They have no appetite for something like that. They want to see, a platform or a B2C business that they understand, be it a restaurant or be it a platform that people can subscribe to, etc. The investors that we tend to target are investors that have previously invested, that tend to invest anywhere between $10,000 to $10,000 and have invested previously in stock markets or real estate. And our average, actually this has gone up now, this is on the screen here, but it needs to be edited. Our average investment average investment ticket per investor used to be $5,800, but now that's gone up to $8,000, because as we are entering different markets, we are getting licensed, and as we are getting licensed, they invest once and then they end up, 27% of them end up investing again and again, and they're more assured now about the platform, and therefore they're now investing more amounts of money. So our investment ticket has gone up to $8,000, and our largest investor invested so far $350,000 via the platform. So, I'm sure you've got a bunch of questions for me, but I'll sit down and I'll take them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sam. So there's a few questions that came from our community that we'll ask you first before we open it up to the floor. So the first one is, do you have any tips for us when finding ideal investors for equity crowdfunding campaign?
I want to say that people investors in general, tend to like investing in some things that they understand or they have an affinity towards. So if you were an architecture business, for example, the best way to do it is to approach a few architects in order for them to see if they're interested in investing in the business or not. People tend to like investing in businesses they understand and they come from that kind of background. So I would say target investors within the same domain, within the same industry, because there's higher likelihood of you raising the funds when they understand the business and have an affinity towards the product.
Thank you. So you were mentioning with the valuation, right? How does one set a company valuation, and who sets those investment terms?
It's a very good question. There are various ways, scientific ways, that you can set a valuation. There is something called the DCF, and there's a WACC, and there's various accounting techniques that you can set a valuation. The issue with it is that when it comes to early stage businesses, it's close to an impossibility to apply these accounting techniques, right? They don't work, they don't apply. So a lot of the valuation is pretty much applied to what is being forecasted. So what you as an entrepreneur are forecasting in the next 3 to 5 years in terms of revenue and in terms of sales. The issue with that is that you get challenged on that forecast quite a lot, because they'll turn around to you and they say, we think you're smoking something. There's no way you're going to hit these numbers in years 2 or 3, and therefore you shouldn't apply that kind of valuation to your product. The only thing I would say, and we have done for Eureeca itself, is when it's very, very early stage, is to look at comparables in other markets and try and customize those comparables to your own market. So you take a look at a platform that does, or a business that does the same thing that you are doing, and how much it raised money at the time for when it was, but that business happens to be in another market. So you can use that as a comparable and say, so-and-so raised funds back at the time for that amount of money, and thank you. And therefore, if we are going to apply that to Malaysia, because we operate in Malaysia, and therefore we can apply a valuation to it. So, and I want to say, especially at early stage, not later on in the business cycle, that valuation and raising money is an art as opposed to a science. So you just have to be very good at sugarcoating your business. You're gonna have to know your business model inside out. You're gonna have to know the numbers inside out, and you're gonna have to know how to pitch it, and to pitch it with confidence. And that's what I'm saying, is that it's an art as opposed to a science.
Thank you. All right, so last question from me. To an individual who might not be as exposed to what crowdfunding is, would you think this field will be general knowledge in the near future, and how would you go about propagating it?
This is the interesting part, is when I started Eureeca 4.5 years ago, I never thought that a business raising money in Dubai would get investors from countries like Jordan and Lebanon or whatever, right? I never thought that. And because when you're investing in a business, you tend to invest in a business that within your own remit or proximity. You don't invest in a business in another jurisdiction. So the interesting part is that we started seeing some cross-border activity in the business. That goes back about 3.5, 4 years ago. Now, after us getting licensed in multiple jurisdictions that I mentioned before, only about, I want to say 2 years ago, that we started seeing cross-border activity, cross-continent activity, sorry. So what I mean is a British investor investing in a Malaysian business. Now, this is 8 hours away in terms of time zones, but people are going ahead with it. People are doing it, right? And we're seeing this activity increase on a monthly basis. So to answer your question, to people that don't know what this is, and I think it's merely a matter of time before the concept of equity crowdfunding is furthermore socialized, and I think it will be in about 5 years from now, 3 to 5 years, it will be completely normal for you when you are in your favorite pizza shop or your favorite restaurant and you're paying the bill, and they will say, by the way, we're raising expansion capital, visit Eureeca.com, find out more, and you're given an iPad right there and then, and you can use your iPad to invest in these businesses. This is actually happening for us right now, but it's not as common as you'll see it in 3 to 5 years from now. I think this is here to stay, and I think it's going to be completely normal for you to see adverts around Malaysia to raise money via equity crowdfunding platforms, but also to invest in businesses and thriving businesses via equity crowdfunding platforms in years to come.
Thank you. All right, so we'll open up the floor for anyone that has any questions. Please raise your hands.
Hi.
So go ahead. How many businesses have you actually raised for in Malaysia?
None.
Okay.
So yeah, to answer your question very quickly, so you're right. We did get licensed in Malaysia a few years ago. I strategically thought that we wanted to wait until, because back then there was if you remember, the ringgit crisis, and I was worried about investment appetite at the time. When people are losing their jobs, they're not going to invest in businesses via the platform, right? So I decided to wait for a little bit. Now the market is so much better. There's real confidence that's come back into the market. So now is the time for us to launch the business, which is why basically I'm here. So now we've got, so far, I want to say about 44 companies in the pipeline coming through from Malaysia right now. We tend to have quite a stringent screening process, not allowing every company to make it onto the platform. But I reckon in the next quarter you will see 2 or 3, if not 4 businesses live on the platform for Malaysia.
Can I just follow on from that in terms of the investors that in terms of the investors you've already got on the platform, what percentage are coming from Southeast Asia?
From Southeast Asia, I would say it's 12 or 13%. 62% are from the GCC, and the rest are mainly UK and the Netherlands. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Just one of that. Is the percentage by amount of capital or by number of investors?
By number of investors. Yeah. Any other questions, guys? So I'll just tell you very quickly by wrapping up, if you don't have any questions. But it's really exciting where you guys are right now. I mean, I think I look back and I remember when we were 2 of us working out of a co-working space. And you end up meeting other entrepreneurs, and you end up chatting about different businesses. You end up talking about different, things that you can collaborate with, etc. It's really exciting. But one thing to be very careful about, especially when it comes to raising money, and this is not in a way a message that I'm putting out there that is anti a certain sector. This is just merely that you guys should be careful of these things, because I've seen these things happen quite a lot over the last 4.5 years, is that you've got to be, when you're getting institutional investors and specifically venture capitalists, try and identify the ones that are actually entrepreneur friendly as opposed to the ones that are complete sharks, okay? And what you've got to beware of, especially when you're devoting so many years of your life into building something, what you don't want to be doing is handing that business over to somebody else just because you wrote you a check throughout your life journey, right? And what you've got to be conscious of are 2 things, right? In these term sheets and in these shareholder agreements what they tend to do, and again, some of them are friendly, some of them are not so friendly, but you've got to be careful of this, because I've seen so many entrepreneurs, specifically from Malaysia, that have signed agreements and they've gotten investors on board, specifically from VCs, and to be honest, we reject those companies making it onto the platform because they've signed away the business already. There's no point in them getting more investors in, because the investor has got more rights than you can ever imagine, more rights than the entrepreneur himself or herself, right? And these 2 terms that you should be very, very wary of, and they tend to be in the term sheets. One, which is anti-dilution rights, right? Do not ever, please read the agreements and read the term sheets very well. I know what they tend to do is give you the offer in the 11th hour just before you die, and they think that is so shrewd, because when you first meet them, the first thing they do is they ask you for your financials. They pretty much broadly work out when you're going to die, and they know exactly when to give you that term sheet, and you will have no choice but to accept that, and therefore you literally handed your business over. Okay? So the second one that you should be aware of, which is, I talked about anti-dilution rights, the second one is preference shares. Okay, preference shares, I am extremely anti-preference shares, and entrepreneurs are handing over the preference to a VC. What that basically means is, if they're writing you a check for $1 million, they typically ask for 2 or 3 times preference, which basically means if you sold the business for $3 million, that first $3 million has to go to them before you get paid or any of your shareholders get paid. So please be wary of preference shares and be wary of anti-dilution rights. Board seats tend to be okay because a large investor would like to protect their investment by sitting on the board and understanding the direction of the company and where it's going. That's fair, but liquidation preference and anti-dilution rights, please never sign up to them, because you're giving the business away, which is a real shame, really.
All right, thank you very much, Sam. Let's give him a round of applause.